My husband's actually refusing to add my sons to his will, so you know what? I decide to do a little bit of petty revenge, and I do something to his daughter nobody saw coming.
I married my husband Joe about 5 years ago. Well, I wouldn't call it marriage. I would say it's a contractual agreement within two people to live together or cohabit. Joe and I met in the most unprecedented way ever. Actually, I wish it was a true love story, and what I share with Joe became a really personal one for me along the way. But it was never the same for Joe. Joe has the most perfect look for a 45-year-old man. He could pass for a really young man. I mean, I'm 42, so there wasn't a major age difference between us, and I willingly walked into the contractual marriage because I saw something in him. Let's start with his beauty. Joe, he was a beautiful man. Although it wasn't a real marriage, I was willing to give him babies at no cost. Funny, right? I love this man. We did not lie to each other because the terms and conditions of our marriage was stated clearly from the get-go. Do not show emotions. It's not real. It's all camouflage. My name's Alina, and I made the wrongest decision to be in a contractual marriage at my big of age. Call me dumb. I wouldn't fight you over it. It might just be the word to describe me. So, I co-owned a mart with a friend. Situation in the heart of Missouri. This mart was always serving the good people of Missouri and the students of the state university well. They really are my biggest consumer and target audience. I wasn't rich, but I was definitely comfortable. I have two amazing sons from a previous marriage. I walked out of that marriage alive after we got divorced over domestic violence charges against him. I gained custody of my children because their father was a monster. He wasn't only assaulting me, but the psychopath would always look for a way to abuse his own children, too. I needed no one to advise me before I knew walking out of the marriage was the best choice. He lost virtually everything he owned to me, although it wasn't all about the money or the gain for me. It was about me and my children making it out alive and calling the death cult tagged marriage quit. He lost his house to me and my children, and a restraining order was placed. My life hasn't really received much help in a long time. I was right in my mart the day I met Joe. He walked into the store like every other normal customer. After getting everything he came to buy, it was time for him to pay, and I realized he was having a difficult time paying. His cards were swiped countless times, and he was getting frustrated. I moved closer to him and asked what's wrong. His eyes were so beautiful. I got lost in them for a moment, and I'm not kidding. He explained his cards were misbehaving, and it seemed to be his unlucky day. I smiled at the statement he made. It kind of made me laugh. I asked him if he stays around, but he told me he doesn't. He only came to drop his daughter off in school, and he needed to help get her some groceries. The moment he said that, I just felt the need to pull him out of this awkward situation. I told him just to go with the groceries and make sure to pay us next time. He was so happy and made a joke about dropping his shoes or his identity card as collateral. I told him worry less, just make sure he stops by to pay us next time. Well, guys, that singular act I exhibited was foreign to me. I've never been lenient with customers. I was running a business and it was strictly business, but something drew me to Joe. He thanked me and he promised to stop by soon, with an active card, of course. The day went by really fast and we closed for the day. It was getting really cold and late in the night, and we had to call it a day. The following day, we were going about our daily lives as we should, not until I saw a familiar figure walk into the mart. I recognized him at a first glance. It was this beautiful man from yesterday. I was really a simp for a beautiful man. Oh, my ex-husband was beautiful too, I just don't learn right. He was to counter to pay off his lingering debt. I wasn't going to say a hello, so he wouldn't know I had a thing for him, but I heard him ask about me. He came to where I was seated, and we exchanged greetings. He thanked me for saving him yesterday, and I told him I don't play such cards. He just seemed really genuine. We chatted for a while before we both remembered we should go back to our daily routine. We exchanged contacts, and he gave his word to always patronize any time he comes around. It was 3 months after the scene at the mart, and Joe finally reached out. Actually, I forgot there was any man. I had things to face. I had kids and a business to monitor. The infatuation I had towards Joe only lasted the time I was seeing him. I totally forgot about him, honestly. He had to reintroduce himself the day he placed the phone call. But I was happy he reached out and he asked if we could meet. We're both adults, why not? He said he would drive down to the state I was in and we fixed a date, just to meet. And it felt like I was in my youth again. It's been years since the last I did this whole fixing a date to meet a man thing. I was willing to go on any date. I was single after all, and I never vowed to be single forever. I found myself surfing the World Wide Web for a date dress idea. I've done a lot of silly things, and as far as I could remember, I had so much fun during the days of my youth. I've always been doing silly things and making bad decisions. Hey, what's up everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope you're having a great day. There's 4 updates for this story. The first update we're going to jump into now. Here it is. Well, the day we agreed to meet finally came, and to my taste, I dressed well. My dress did not scream desperate. It was simple, classy. Joe looked beautiful, just like the last time I saw him. We hugged and placed orders, chit-chatted, and the date went really well. We promised to do it again. During the course of the date, Joe asked if I was married. I told him I got a divorce and I also have 2 sons from the marriage. I asked about his marriage life too, and he told me, although he hasn't gotten a divorce yet, his wife and him are no longer together. I didn't understand what he meant. He said his wife moved out of the house all of a sudden. She didn't divorce him and he hasn't seen her? He would have divorced her himself, no? Although it would be expensive. Quote, divorce favors the woman, you know. I told him yes, that's because we have substantial reasons to back it up. And he asked if I was open to marrying somebody else. I told him the next time I would be getting married must be worth it. Because I can't keep walking out of marriages. I need a safe place. He told me he understood what I meant. Joe said he doesn't want to sound too forward or reasonable, but I should hear him out. I told him I was listening to him. He asked if I would like to get married to him. Huh? He was asking for my hand in marriage? I wanted to jump on him and tell him yeah, but I held that cheeky spirit in my back. I told him he was a cool man and I would love to marry him. However, he will need to give me time to think about it. Joe was a confident man himself. He said there was nothing to think about, but I should do my thing and let him know if I was willing to go on that journey with him. He didn't even end it there, as he further said there was a condition. He said we weren't going to get married legally. I asked him how's that possible. Then he dropped the bomb. He said he needed my help. He said he was their heir to his father's business, and his father had been having a second thought about handing the business over to him. He said his father knows he was more than capable to pilot the business, but he was using a particular card against him. I asked him what the card was, and he said his father said he was going to hand over his business to someone that could properly manage his home. To someone his wife left him. His father said such person would not know how to manage a huge business. A huge part of me agreed with his father. Manage and control your home well, and we can trust you with any other thing. I then asked him how I was supposed to help in this. He said by marrying him, I'm handing the business over to him without even me knowing. That sounded like he really needed my help, but why did he say we weren't going to get married legally when he needed this much help from me? I really didn't get an answer to my question. I told him we should get married legally then. Joe said there's no need for that. He also convinced me by reminding me that he hasn't gotten a proper divorce from his wife, so marrying another one seems nearly impossible. I told him to wait till he gets a proper divorce. Joe said he needed me now. I was confused. Did he only ask to see me because he needed me? That seemed to be the case. Joe said he knew he was giving me a hard task, but I should look at the bigger picture. He said I should know I would be getting something out of it. I would be living under his roof as a CEO's wife. I told him, hey, I'm a CEO too, so being his wife would not change anything. He said it was going to change a lot because I would enter high places. He sounded really manipulative. But I overlooked that part of him, and he told me living under his roof might just bring his wife out of her hiding place and then get a divorce from her. He told me I would have a lot to gain than lose. I told Joe I had 2 children. He said he was already ready to be their father. That statement was relieving to hear, I'll say that. I felt I was making a wrong decision, but I also felt it was so right. He told me we just need to convince his father. Get the business and live happily ever after. I've always been a risk taker, so why not? Let's do this. Update number 2. Alina, you're doing the right time. I would tell myself this. Joe and I started to see each other, and he made me travel interstate a lot of times. I travel back and forth almost every weekend. His father took interest in me the first time he saw me. He said he knew his son would get an amazing woman in his life. I was happy to gain acknowledgement from the elder. Knowing he was being lied to, though, I felt bad. Joe's father told me his son would own his business soon, and I should please give him the full support he needs. I told him he could count on me anytime. After I got that approval, Joe was almost licking and worshiping my feet. He said he knew I would be instrumental to his success, bragging about how his sense of judgment is always right. He couldn't stop grinning from ear to ear. I was moving into Joe's house with my children. That would mean I had to leave my business, the one I've invested so much effort, energy, and money into. I had to leave it behind. The house I got from my husband after our divorce, I had to leave it behind as well. Everything just didn't feel right, but I was doing it. The whole time I was seeing Joe, he introduced his daughter to me, his only daughter. Helen was cute, like her father. She was 19. The time I met her father and she was in college, Helen liked me too. She was really a cool baby girl. The entanglement I was about to get into with Joe made me sacrifice a whole lot of things. And I moved in with Joe together with my children. Joe got repaid by gaining ownership of the business. I was happy I helped. There was nothing binding us legally, but we were still a very close couple. I paid attention to the tiniest details about him because I wanted to be a good wife, while playing my role perfectly. Nobody knew our marriage wasn't real or sealed illegally, but we were the cutest couple you would ever see. Well, our marriage was beautiful, and yes, he took my children, like both of them. My children were instrumental to him too. My sons, they were high schoolers, but there were times that they skipped school because Joe needed them to do something. It did not sit well with me, but technically Joe was my husband and I couldn't say no. Joe would do some things I would never tolerate, and the money I realized I was cutting him some slack. I knew I was already in love with him. It's also been 1.5 years of us being together, and I'm basically crazily in love with him. He knew it too. He could tell I was definitely in love. But he was holding back. Times I tried to show him I loved him, he would get me a cold shoulder. I tried to carry his baby, and he would tell me not to try it. He would remind me I was getting old, and if I tried anything like carrying a baby, I might have regrets due to complications. It got to the point I started considering leaving him. I was a total stranger to him sometimes, but where would I go? Who would I tell my story to? I have a house, but I no longer have a job. This whole time, I was a housewife to Joe. I tried to start a business, and he told me I wasn't allowed. He said he was enough, and I always reminded him we were not married legally, and I should be allowed to do things my way. Joe would tell me I want to run away from him. He would tell me his daughter, Helen, took me as a mother. He would ask me if I want to run away from her the same her mother ran away. Well, I didn't know what to do or make sense of any of this. It wasn't even up to 2 years of us being together, and he's already being unfair. He won't marry me legally, and he won't allow me to move freely. Joe, at least he wasn't beating me. He isn't one to do that, but he was torturing me mentally. I concluded that there was more to the reason why his wife lived out of the house. I concluded he had something he was hiding. If I tried to run away, I would be hurting my children. Do I want to be taking them from one man's house to another? I'm really not that kind of woman to hop around. My children weren't aware of how I came into this man's life. They wouldn't understand why I wanted to move so suddenly. I don't want to look like a confused woman to my children. Joe was nice to my kids, but was cruel to me. After a while of staying together, I believed he should have developed a soft spot for me, but no. He developed a hard spot. He had only had a beautiful face, his heart was hard as a rock, and he was one of a kind. I kept everything I was passing through to myself. The mental abuse, the emotional abuse, they were much for me to handle, but I deceived everybody close. I don't have parents, so I couldn't run to anybody. I was an only child. Reason why I've always made such reckless decisions, I guess. Those decisions are costing me my sanity. To be honest, I've never expected it to be this hard from the beginning. Joe presented this agreement to me in what way, and I wouldn't take offense to it. But look at me now. I've started showing emotions. I thought it was a small task and I could cope, but I'm a human being after all. I don't want to break. I'm holding everything in, and I'm holding everything together. I'm scared I might lose it. Hey guys, Mr. Edito, so this story just took a big turn. Update 3 might shock you a little, because OP did not post an update for 3 entire years. Then OP came back to the thread and posted this. Hey guys, it's been 3 years since I last updated. I thought I should give an update about the situation and things in my life. I got a lot of requests to do it, so my children were done with high school, and Joe advised that they pin together to go to the higher institution because now's the best time to learn the nitty-gritty of business. I'm not so educated, so I don't know much about schooling, but I was smart, with a little bit of dumbness to me. I know I didn't have much to say in this thing. Nothing was tying me to this man but my children. They know why I left their father, but they wouldn't know why I'm leaving this man. So, I chose to stay. But what about the future of my children? I convinced myself that my children knowing about business now doesn't sound like a bad idea. Helen came home on this particular day and we were having a family time when she spoke about how stressful it's been for her going home from school. Her apartment was far to school, and right there, Joe faced me and reminded me I have an apartment that's close to his daughter's school. After all, no one was even staying there. I was taken aback by this statement. This was my ex-husband's house in question, and my new husband wants his daughter to live there? This man has no shame. I told him it's fine, and she could live there since the house was truly closer to her school. Helen was so happy, and I was happy to see her happy. Later that night, Helen told me she would like to have a conversation with me, so I welcomed her. The first thing she did was to ask me how I'm doing. It was the first time someone asked me that in ages. I felt like pulling her into a hug. I thanked her and I told her I was very fine. She said she's never seen me complain, and she said her mother was always complaining before she finally moved out. Helen said her mother told her she never wanted the marriage with her father. That statement made me shiver. It sounded so cliche. She read my expression for a moment and continued. Helen's mother told her Joe convinced her into getting pregnant. She never wanted to have anything long-term with Joe. She further explained that her mouth said Joe was desperate and manipulative. She said her parents were always quarreling and her mother almost ran mad. That was the icing on the cake for me. I knew she didn't just move out. I knew there was more to it. When he told me his wife moved out without a reason, I believed him until I moved into his house and I realized how vile of a person he really is. I started suspecting his wife did not just move out. There was something insane backstory to it. Helen went on to tell me her mother asked for a divorce, but her father did not grant the divorce. She said she never blamed her mother for moving out because her mental health was at stake. She said her mother was always in pain and her father was never bothered. I started thinking of how crazy Joe is. I was scared because I don't know what he planned me to do. It's been 3 years and I've been seeing how psycho he truly is. Why does he treat women like that? Are we just toys to him? I knew I was on a long thing because I was not even married to him and I was living under his roof. I left the business I co-owned to live with him. Who do I tell my story to? Then they tell me I've gone insane. Helen said she wasn't trying to paint her father into a bad image, but she was only concerned about me. She said she doesn't want to see me leave too, like she likes me. Ever since her mother left them, she hasn't come back to them. She said she missed her mother, but there's been no way to reach her, and at this point, Helen was already crying. She wasn't aware I was fighting demons too, little Helen. She was not aware of the kind of agreement I made with her father. Joe asked me to be with him because he wanted to own his father's business. He's sneaky, and he comes off as someone that would do anything just to get what he wants. We lived in like total strangers, and hey, we were strangers. But did he find me unworthy? I know I sold myself short by agreeing to this to begin with, but he said it was much hope. Now, I can't do anything on my own. I'm practically useless. I wanted someone to be there for me and my children. I wanted someone I can call my own, someone I can share my emotions with freely. I've been through so much in my previous marriage, I did not sign up for another mess like this one that I found myself in. I vowed to reset my life well, to rewrite my story about my previous message, but this was me going through heck. Helen said if I'm feeling some type of way, she told me to tell her. She said that she wasn't strong enough to be there for her mother, but she wanted to be there for me. She was so sweet with her words that I wanted to take her with me and just run away. People would say I'm selfish, and people would say I wanted money. Not that they were entirely wrong, but it was supposed to be a fair agreement. I believe Joe did not divorce his wife because he doesn't want to lose her. He knows what's at stake. If he should divorce her, he is so crazy. It was my fault for falling hard for someone like him. How does heart work? Does heart not think on its own? I told Helen everything will be fine. I told her her father was not a bad person even when I knew he was a psychopath. She left for her room and I was left to reminisce. I knew Joel told me nothing between us going to be serious, and I should have not expected anything more from him. But we got intimate often. How was it possible for me to get intimate with Joe and not have feelings for him? I've defaulted so much. I've tried to have conversations with Joe, and he's always invalidating my feelings. He always acts as if he didn't do anything wrong. Nothing I say to him's moved him. I've threatened to report to his father. I've even threatened to go tell him that we're not married. He would tell me to go ahead and see how much I would end up putting myself out. He said he really doesn't care, and he has the business now, and nothing I do will move up. And as far as he's concerned, he would not allow me to leave his surroundings. What was he gaining from torturing me like this? Agreeing to a contractual marriage was my fault. Cursed be the day I met him. Update number 4, final update. Hey guys, this might just be the longest update because a lot's happened in my life. I'm taking each as it comes, and life ain't always black and white, and karma doesn't work in our favorite times. Maybe I was just unlucky. Well, it's been 2 years since Helen started living in my house, which was closer to her school, meaning it's been 5 years since my marriage agreement to Joe. Helen was a sweet girl, after all, so I never had any problems with her living in my house. Well, my children weren't going to school still, and I didn't have money to send them to college, and the only man that I had has been using my children the way he wants. I know I would go down in history as one of the most irresponsible mothers ever. Not long ago, I started noticing some slimy movements and questionable characters in Joe. Well, he never hid it since he doesn't care about how I felt. He was seeing a lady, and I got to discover that they've been seeing each other for quite some time. I felt used, and I could not tell if this new lady is one of his play toys, like he's been using me. I couldn't tell if she was an attempt at him showing genuine love towards someone. Joe wasn't being fair. Why couldn't he try to love me? Why did he only allow it to stop at using me to acquire his father's business? I was determined to fight him, but on what basis? We never agreed to be husband and wife on paper. No one would take me serious. I confronted him and asked him if I can leave now since he has a new lady in his life. Joe told me I'll always think everything was about me alone. He said, do I even have any shame? Why do I always want to be at the center of everything? Joe opened my healing wound. He said he saw reasons why my ex-husband had me beaten. Joe said I was too stubborn and I needed to give it a rest. He said he'd only make the rules and I should never question him. Joe said, what if he decided to marry me the following day? He was saying all of this as if being with me was doing him a favor. He told me I should not think men would tolerate a woman like me, a divorced woman like me. Well, Joe hurt me. All the times he was saying that, I couldn't find the tears. I longed to cry it out, and nothing came forth. He said he was only helping his ex-wife by not giving her a divorce because who would want to be associated with a failure? I told him no. He did not give her a divorce because of his selfish gain. I told him I saw through him. He didn't want to have any reason to slash his wealth, did he? I told him that was the reason he was refusing to legally marry me too. He was scared of divorce because he knows he was a psychopath and no woman would deem it fit to be with him. We got into a heated argument this day, and he left the house for me and never came back until the following day. After he stumbled out of the house, I was in rage. I was in pain. I wanted to cry it out, but I don't know, I didn't. I wanted to scream, run away. My ex-husband did not even torture me this way. He would just beat me instead. I entered his room, and I didn't know what I was looking for. I just wanted to vent my anger. I started looking for what was not lost. I scattered everywhere as if it was looking for my birthright. Helen told me her mother almost ran mad, and I was suffering the same fate, it seemed. I was almost running mad too. I saw files upon files, and my attention was stolen when I saw one with a pretty cover. I thought it was a journal at first. The hardcover was beautiful, and I picked it open and I opened it. I really wasn't prepared for what I found. I discovered Joe had his will written already. How? Why? My feet became cold. I sat on the floor to read the content of the will, and Joe had a 99% wealth willed to his daughter. I'm not against him willing her his properties, but 99%? I was sure that wasn't all. He was still going to build businesses. He was still going to will everything to her. That was when I knew I meant absolutely nothing to this man. He only used me and my children, and he saw a broke in me, and he broke me even more. He approached me so he could acquire more wealth, and I was to get something from it too. But now I see what he planned. He left nothing to me. What about my sons? He had made my sons work for him. He stopped me from working too. Why does he want to hurt me so much, I still wonder. The tears, they didn't come out earlier, but they came down freely now. I've always been unlucky all my life, and Joe was a selfish, heartless man. He planned everything out so much that I couldn't fight back. I had no substantial evidence against him, and he was going to use me until I became useless. I even allowed his daughter to stay in the house I got from my ex-husband, and he still never thought that I've been useful to him, not even once. I couldn't tear those papers into pieces, but I knew I had to do something. I had to let out my anger somehow, and I knew I was going to hurt someone, but I didn't care. I've always been the one being hurt. I called Helen. I told her she might just need to start paying rent for the house she's staying in. She thought I was joking at first, but I made her realize that I was dead serious. She was one of her master's degree at the university then. I knew what I did was petty, but I told her to pay me for the month right away. Helen didn't argue with me, of course. She didn't know what was going on, but she sent me rent and the amount I told her to remit. Joe came back to me to confront me and asked me why I would ask his daughter to pay rent. He said if I was really desperate for money, I could have just asked him. He never ceased to use condescending words on me. He told me I was childish, and I told him I simply didn't care. I flung the papers in his face, and I told him karma would come for him since I can't do anything to him. I threatened to reveal what was between us to his father for the up-10th time, and he didn't seem to care anymore at all. He told me to go ahead, and of course told me to go to heck. That was it for me. I prepared to go to Joe's father. I got to his big mansion, and I was told he was taking a nap. So I sat impatiently for hours waiting for him to awake. When he finally showed up, he greeted me well, in a way a father-in-law would greet his son's wife. He did notice distress in my face, and he asked me what was wrong. I apologized to him first, and I told him I've wronged him. I started with how myself and Joe met, how we agreed to be a couple without any strings attached. His face became expressionless. I even thought he didn't hear me at first, and he spoke and he said this. How then do I think he can be of help? I wasn't really prepared to hear that. He said, I've lived a lie with his son for the past 5 years, and now I'm coming out to tell the truth because things didn't go my way, huh? Joe's father said he would not support his son's actions, but there's nothing he could do about it. He said Joe has been running his business for the past years, and he has no regrets. I should tell him why he needs to collect the business from him again. Tears streamed down my face. Joe's father said he turned his son into a kind person. He said he was always kin of him having a wife in his home, which has led into him being reckless. He said he was sorry for me, but my situation could not be helped. I felt like strangling the old man and also got home to strangle his son. I was absolutely filled with such rage. Out of annoyance, I told the old man he was an evil man and he raised a monster just like him. I told him people are okay things to bother father and son, and I can't wait for him to regret his actions. Joe's father told me to get out of his house. He said this exact words. Get out, you filthy woman. Me, a filthy woman? Cursed be the day I entered their family. I was sent out like a thief in the night, and he said he'll tell his son to keep far away from himself and his daughter. Blood is indeed thicker than water, and I went back home with a heavy heart. I thought the old man was going to be reasonable, but rather he fed me with venomous words that I died and resurrected. I was just on my way home when Helen sent me a message. She wrote there that her father explained everything to her. She said, and as much as her father wronged me, she said I should not have done that to her. She says I wouldn't mind killing her if I had the power. Well, I read that message in her voice, and I could hear disappointment written all over the text message. I wasn't proud I took it on her. It was just the only way to get back to her. Helen wasn't my target. She was soft. She was a sweet girl. But I needed to let my pain out flowing somehow. She said she wishes me luck, but she would never act the same way towards me anymore. Helen said she doesn't mind paying rent. After all, she was almost done with her degree. She said, our relationship now is that of a house owner and a tenant. I thought I could take you as a mother, but you're reckless. I couldn't bring myself to reply to her message until today. I've lost a lot in my life, and I've lost her too. I wanted to go all out legally just to fight Joe, but who did I think I was, a legal wife? That was a joke of the century. Joe's had this coming. He's always been a gamer. He'd had everything mapped out such that he'd never lose. Thinking back to the moment I agreed to be in this contractual marriage, I should have requested from some sort of papers, serving as a witness with our signatures. I was too dumb to put everything on paper. I want to fight, but I have nothing to fight with. I would only be seen as a third wheel in a marriage, and I would be seen as a mistress, since he's never divorced his first wife. I called my sons, and I told them how everything began. They felt sorry for me, and they told me they'll always be there for me. I should have come clean to my children before now. Maybe they would have understood me, and I would have walked out of this facade since. I told my sons I was moving out of Joe's house. My sons said that they were leaving the house with me. I just hope my reckless life did not tamper with my son's mental health. I should have been a bit better of a mother to my amazing boys. I will sure have my life figured out shortly again, although I won't stop collecting rent from Helen. It won't solve anything, but I just want to be petty like her father.
Alright guys, so this story didn't really have a good resolution in the end. I don't know, it just seemed like everybody was still mad. I mean, OP was still charging petty rent. The husband of this story, he didn't even seem to care about any of this. And the daughter, who didn't seem to even be a problem the whole story, was now caught in between this pettiness. I have one question for you guys about this story. If you were in this unique position we found OP in, what exactly would you do if you were in OP's shoes and you had to deal with the daughter, the husband, the two sons not being included in the will? Tell me everything you guys would do. Drop your comments in the comment section down below, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on today's story. If you're new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories every single day. If that's something you're into, consider subscribing, and I hope to see you guys tomorrow. See ya!